So this video is going to be a little bit loaded because I have to give you some context before I start rambling on about 10th level spells. See, the gist of it is that 10th level spells and anything above that, they are essentially barred from being used. This comes from the highest authority in the matter, Mystra, the goddess of magic. Now, do not fret, there are actual ways in which you can cast spells such as these, though it is kind of a workaround, but we will cover that in about 2 videos from now. Today, I want to focus on these very specific 10th level spells. Even though you cannot cast them anymore, they still exist. They got names, spell effects, durations, the whole thing, and they are pretty crazy as you can imagine. But first, let's actually go with the context. So this is the map of Faerun. Basically, everything that has to do with 5th edition is set on this map, at least the vast majority of it. From Tomb of Annihilation to Dragon Heist to Descent into Avernus. The Dungeons & Dragons MMO called Neverwinter is set here, and the new Baldur's Gate game coming soon will also be set here. Now, about 5,000 years before any of that, before any of your campaigns, before any of the events that transpired in any of those adventures or games, back then existed a human empire, and a pretty cool one too. The empire was called the Empire of Netheril. This place used to be right here where the desert of Anarog is located, though back then it actually wasn't a desert. Netheril was incredible. I mean, when you think about a high magic empire, this is probably what you're gonna think about. Their cities floated in the sky, their mages could cast 10th and 11th level spells. Hell, even their commoners could cast magic. When you look at the player's handbook and you see elves, and you see that it doesn't matter what kind of elf you wanna play, you still know a few cantrips, maybe even some first level spells. It's almost as if they teach that stuff in grade school or something. Well, that's how humans used to be as well. Every single human could cast cantrips, and most people could cast first level spells. Those that lived in Netheril were technically more advanced than any elvish civilization at the time. There were, however, 2 things that led to their demise as a country. The first were the Faerun, a race of underground monsters that were attracted to the magic that the Netherese were casting. The two fought in brutal wars that exhausted the empire. The second was Karsus. Karsus was the best mage in the empire, an erudite even amongst sages. See, he casted the first and only 12th level spell, which backfired. It ended up resulting in magic basically just failing all across the globe. Essentially, magic just turned off for a few hours thanks to this spell. Now, the Faerun have powers that drain magic and life out of things, so wherever they went, the land decayed. When you combined that with some of the leftover spells from the Netherese, well, it turned the otherwise verdant, temperate land into a scalding hot magical desert, which it still is up to this day. Most of the ruins from the Empire were absorbed by the sands, which is why they're not self-evident. You can't, however, if you pay close attention, find pieces of this once powerful empire scattered all across the map. For example, if you play Lost Mines of Phandelver, you can actually find a side quest that can take you into Old Owl Well, a deserted and broken down outpost tower with a magical well. See, that place used to actually be a frontier outpost of the Netherese Empire. Skullport, the Port of Shadows on the 3rd level of Undermountain, was also actually built by a group of Netherese wizards looking for a place to work their experiments. When magic stopped working for a few hours thanks to the effects of Karsus' massive 12th level spell, all the wards that protected Skullport from cave-ins stopped working and 2/3 of the place collapsed. The Netherese wizards died and turned into the floating green skulls that you see floating around Skullport nowadays. But that's not where it ends. The Netherese were actually the inventors of many of the spells that you use nowadays. For example, the Magic Missile and Shield spell were both invented by General Maddock, a Netherese arcanist. If you ever wondered why the Shield spell specifically works with Magic Missile, is because of this. They were both made together. The Light spell, for example, could only be cast back then by clerics, until Brightfinger, an arcanist from the Netherese Empire. He invented the wizard version. Now, you're not casting Charm Person, really you're casting Keonit's Charm Human, or Keonit's Gias, or Keonit's Confusion. Keonit basically invented every famous charming effect. The spell Fireball was invented by the arcanist Noanar, as well as many other fire spells like Fire Shield and Wall of Fire, both actually called Noanar's Shield and Noanar's Wall. I could actually go on, and I would basically cover over 80% of the spells on the player's handbook, hell, maybe even more. Modern wizard magic was basically invented by the Netherese. Now I can see some people confused, so I do want to clarify that I'm strictly talking about wizard spells, not sorcerers. Devils could cast fireballs long before Nuanar. They do that via their sorcerer's blood. They can just innately do it as sorcerers. Turning the magical weave into fire like a wizard does is something entirely different, and yeah, before the Netherese, nobody really knew how to do any of these spells. But that brings me to the crux of the video. 10th level spells. The Netherese were so skillful, many of them ended up learning and using 10th and 11th level spells. Many of those spells were lost in the fall of the Empire, but some still remain. Even if they are unusable, we still know what they used to do, and if anything, they give great context as to what kind of power a 10th level spell is supposed to give you, you know, just in case. Once again though, I would like to remind you all that all of the spells that I'm about to give you cannot be used anymore. Mystra, the goddess of magic, banned any mortal from casting 10th level spells or higher. But anyways, here we go. The first spell we got is called Leafiver's Weave Mythal. Level 10 spell, duration permanent, area of effect is 300 feet radius sphere per level, that is, per level of the caster, and the casting time is 3 days. Quote, "This spell created a spherical force of magic that required an activation of some sort to allow entry. All living creatures, undead creatures, animated creatures, and the like unfamiliar with the activation key were unable to penetrate the perimeter of the spell. The method used to penetrate a mythal included somatic movement, word or phrase activator, proper alignment or motivation, riding a specific kind of mount, humming a few bars of a song, or an item with a magical imprint of some sort." End quote. What we're talking about here is a force field that surrounds a town or a city, something akin to Leomund's tiny hut, but massive, and even better because you could enchant the force field as part of the spell to damage interlopers. Casting the spell, however, required part of your life force, which meant that the caster would lose a level every time the spell was cast. Next, we got Maven's Create Volcano. Now, Maven himself was incredible. I mean, this guy invented 2 level 10 spells and a level 11 spell. He was also the inventor of Meteor Swarm, Stone to Flesh, and Wall of Iron, which we actually don't have in 5th edition. But anyways, Create Volcanoes had a range of 1 mile per caster level, a duration of a year, and a casting time of a day. Quote, "This spell was never cast on Netheril, but every arcanist that looked at its formula was convinced that it would do as promised, create a volcano. Numerous ideas were brought forward to rid Netheril of the threat of the orcs, goblins, and other undesirable creatures, but the threat to other ground-dwelling creatures, including the dwarves, elves, and other grounding cities, was too great. According to spell notes, the casting of the spell would produce a minor earthquake in the effects area. Within a week, ash and steam would be seen pouring through the earth. Within a month, a complete erupting volcano would be present. The material components of the spell included a mantle of sewn diamonds that acted as double-strength ring of fire resistance, a helm of brilliance, and a mythalar, which was placed at the site of the volcano." End quote. See, now I should explain what a mythalar is. The mythalar was the greatest of all of the Netherese creations, though it is difficult to explain in short terms. Imagine if you could create an orb that could hold concentration for you. Well, that's basically what a mythalar is, except that it could hold all of the concentrations. The mythalar was like the engine to their car in their civilization, like the battery to their machines, the heart of their body. The mythalar had the ability to grab raw magic from the weave and hold it for use in spells or abilities, and they created tons of them to help them run their cities. Anyways, next we got Maven's Earthfast. Its range is 1 mile per caster level, duration is a year per caster level, and the area of effect was 1 mile per caster level. The casting time was 9 minutes. Quote, This spell was initially created to allow further mining of areas that were too dangerous to work otherwise. By casting the Earthfast spell, large areas of underground tunnels became impervious to cave-ins and other similar catastrophes. The magic supporting the ceiling so that additional mining could continue. The spell was also used for other purposes, since it also drastically halted the weathering of city streets and buildings. Many cities sought out arch-wizards who would cast the Earthfast spell to preserve important areas of their community. The material components for the spell were a stone of controlling earth elementals, 6 chardolins, each of which were imbued with a transmute mud to rock spell, and an earth elemental. All the components were consumed during the casting. Like I said, Mavin also created a level 11 spell, but we will cover those on the next video. So next we got Proctiv's Move Mountain, a personal favorite. Its range is as far as you can see, duration permanent, and the area of effect is, well, the whole targeted mountain. The casting time was 2 hours. Quote, "This spell was vital in the construction of enclaves. Without this spell, there was no simple way for severed mountains to be turned over and set afloat above the landscape. When this spell was cast, the Archwizard simply viewed the mountain he wanted to affect, and the mountain was severed from the earth, leaving a flat mesa behind. The mountain was then turned over so that the flat side was up, and the Move Mountain spell allowed this new structure to levitate. Once this was accomplished, the Archwizard could begin constructing a city upon its smooth surface. The material components for the spell were a mythallar, which needed to be placed in the new city within 2 weeks, a magical device that allowed flying or levitation, and a crystal ball." End quote. See, the kingdom of Netheril was divided into the Upper Netheril, which were the floating cities, and the Lower Netheril, which were the cities down on the ground. As you can imagine, the affluent and the nobles lived on the floating cities, while the rest lived down on the earth. But next we got Tolodine's Killing Wind. The range is 300 feet per caster level, the duration of 1 hour per caster level, an area of effect of 300 feet per caster level, and a casting time of, well, a single round. Quote, "Tolodine's Killing Wind was designed to kill large numbers of creatures, and it worked well. When cast, billowing vapors moved away from the caster at an incredible rate of speed, overtaking anything within the area of effect unless magical means were used to escape. Creatures caught within the cloud were entitled to a single saving throw versus spells to resist being killed by the spell. Creatures made a saving throw with a modifier based on the caster's sacrifice. The casting of this spell automatically drained 2 life levels from the caster, though for purposes of area of effect, range and duration, the caster's original level was used. In addition, the caster could opt to sacrifice more life energy, imposing a -1 penalty to all saving throws for every 2 levels so sacrificed, up to a maximum of -10. The one side effect to this, however, was that there was a 5% chance per level drained voluntarily that the caster's essence would be pulled into the negative energy plane forever. If pulled into the negative material plane, one of 2 things occurred. If the caster was alive, the essence was consumed and the caster killed. The spellcaster was lost forever and could not be resurrected or brought back to life in any way. If the spellcaster was undead, the essence continued to exist, but it was trapped in the negative material plane. End quote. The negative energy plane doesn't exist anymore after the events of the Spell Plague, so now in 5th edition all we have is the Shadowfell, which is essentially the same thing. But anyways, this is the second time where you hear the concept of sacrificing levels in order to cast a powerful spell. And this was actually something very common back in those days when there were no restrictions to magic. See, a wizard back then didn't really have a limit into how much magic they could harness from the weave in order to cast their spells. The only limiting factor was how skilled they were. If they were very skilled, then you could reach levels unimaginable. I mean, that's how these people managed to learn 10th and 11th level spells. Theoretically speaking, I mean, if you were good enough, you could turn into a demigod just out of sheer skill in manipulating the weave. Obtaining such levels, however, hurt the caster tremendously as it was possible to sacrifice your life essence in order to compensate for lack of skill. After Karsus casted his 12th level spell and the subsequent breakdown of the weave, however, Mizra, the goddess of magic, ended up banning any mortal from being able to manipulate too much of the weave, essentially meaning that we can only cast spells up to 9th level now. It doesn't matter how good you are. However, and this is part of the workaround that I was talking about at the beginning of the video, you can still, up to this day, hurt yourself in order to achieve power greater than 9th level, but that's what we call epic magic, which is a canon thing, by the way, that you can do in Dungeons & Dragons, but we will talk about that maybe about 2 videos from now. Anyways, the next spell is Valdic's Sphere Cell, but we will also cover that one actually on the next video because it deals with spell jamming, which is the art of traveling through the prime material planes. Essentially, it deals with going from the Forgotten Realms to Ravnica or Everon. For example, if you wanted to go from Waterdeep to Saltmarsh, then you would have to travel in this manner, since Saltmarsh is actually set on Greyhawk, not in the Forgotten Realms. Now, keep in mind that this is not like traveling using plane shift. It's actually a lot more complicated, but yeah, we will cover that on the next video, don't worry about it. The last level 10 spell that we have is called Lowlands Longevity. Now, this guy is considered to be probably one of the top 3 of the best mages of Netheril, certainly considered to be the father of Netheril. That is because he was the creator of the Mythallar alongside the creator of the very first floating city. Now, we don't have the full information on this spell as we have for the others, but we know that the range was 12,000 feet with an area of 112 feet radius and a casting time of a round. The spell dealt massive damage to every creature within its area of effect, but the twist was that every creature slain by this spell would add 1 year of permanent life to the caster. The spell damaged constructs and undead, but those wouldn't add to the longevity of the caster. It's interesting that Lowlands is one of the only Netherese wizards of those days that actually still lives. Turned out that the very same life and magic-sucking abilities of the Farum that caused the Netheril lands to turn into a desert also sucked the life-extending magic that kept him alive. So he turned himself into a lich and left the kingdom. He actually abandoned his enclave for the seclusion of the Sword Coast, and he was never seen again. His fate remains a mystery up to this day. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. There were a lot of really cool spells today, crazy ass spells. But tomorrow we're going to talk about level 11 spells. And we're also going to have to talk about spell jamming, which for those of you who do not know is essentially space. You know, what happens if you actually go to space in the Forgotten Realms in Dungeons & Dragons, which is a thing. You'll be surprised how much how crazy things can get, which is all canon, by the way. All of this I'm going to talk about on the next episode is canon, but it is going to get pretty crazy, so please don't miss that video. I would like to thank my Patreon supporters, Ricardo Fan, Daniel Luna, Dr. Cowbell, Skids Your Boy, Major Fail Gaming, Saliog, Barry Maskant, 5E Magic Shop, Dog Feeder, Daniel Umar, Morgan Johnson, Zach Bowell, Simon Holman, Rusty Rain, Biotechnofrag, Kush Bane, and Meaty Ogre at Best for supporting me on Patreon at the $25 level. If you would like to support me as well, then please head on over to patreon.com/MrRhexx to support. Guys, once again, thank you so much. Make sure to go ahead and watch the playlist so that you can see all of my awesome D&D videos. Please do not miss them. Anyways, see you all on the next video, guys. Bye-bye.